Hello fellow bike people! I'm filming this on May 12th, 2020, and that means that yesterday, most small businesses in Ontario were able to reopen with social distancing measures in place. The general consensus seems to be going from stay home to keep your distance. Before I go any further though, a little disclaimer. I've said this before and I've said it again, I am not a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying here is my interpretation of the recommendations right now, so anything your local government or health authorities say overrules anything I say. Now, to my understanding, the flatten the curve movement has started to show some serious results, and that's why yesterday businesses with street entrances, so not malls, and most parks and conservation areas were reopened to the public. The businesses have to follow strict social distancing measures. The parks are only partially open. That means that the park facilities like washrooms, playgrounds, tennis courts, skate parks, things like that are still completely off limits. What is open is the trails for walking and cycling. Now, the risk of a second wave of coronavirus is real, but cyclists are lucky. We have a lot going for us right now. The way I see it, we have the best mode of transportation for social distancing, and we have the best way of getting outside and having some sort of recreation with social distancing. Now, when it comes to transportation, cars are still king in most of Canada. That's because Canada is, well, huge. A lot of places are only accessible by long road trip. That said, many people in urban areas like Toronto and Mississauga don't have cars for personal transportation. They rely on things like Uber or public transit. Now, while buses and ride-sharing apps still have a huge presence in Mississauga, they're nowhere near as safe as they used to be. In the interest of getting around while social distancing, I feel Mississauga is way too big and spaced out to do on foot, and for the last couple years the city's been doing a pretty good job of adding more bike paths and pathways for pedestrians, so riding is getting easier in the city. That makes bikes perfect for these conditions, especially because summer's right around the corner. Cycling for transport is an even better option than normal right now, and it's generally safe, but it carries a few risks of its own, and there's also a few additional risks because of the pandemic. There's loads of information about general cycling safety online, so I don't really want to get into that. I want to talk about the pandemic-specific parts of this. Now, the obvious concern is that healthcare systems can't take extra workload right now. They're already overburdened, and some people would see cycling injuries as unnecessarily taxing on the system. This is certainly something to keep in mind, but for the most part, cycling can be done very safely if you do it properly. In my mind, the bigger concern is groups of cyclists riding together, or cyclists being forced to ride on sidewalks or in close proximity to pedestrians because of the city's infrastructure. Everything I'm seeing right now says the chance of being infected by passing by someone on the street are pretty low, but the 5-person limit, it's there for a reason. Cyclists have to work pretty hard sometimes, especially in hilly cities like Mississauga, and we huff and puff a lot when we get tired. Mask or not, it's important that we plan out our routes to avoid pedestrians and other people and other cyclists as much as possible, and it's also important that we're able to change our routes on the fly to adapt and, again, just stay away from people. So now let's talk about the recreational side of this. It's almost summer and the whole world's been locked down for months. We all want to ride. It sucks like this, but it's almost time for us to get back out there. However, we gotta get back out there very carefully. As I mentioned before, we don't want to be an unnecessary burden on the healthcare system, and recreational cycling can often lead to aggressive or competitive cycling, which has its own separate list of risks. One of the things I love about bikes is that, unlike cars, you don't have to go to a track to get your vehicle maxed out while keeping it legal. I love ripping around the local trails at breakneck speeds with my friends, but now's not the time. That time will return, but it's not now. In a dedicated bike park, there are no pedestrians. In most trails and conservation areas, there are pedestrians. The areas that are open right now are overwhelmingly those conservation areas where there are going to be a lot of pedestrians, and because the warm weather's coming, I foresee those parks and conservation areas getting extremely crowded, like packed to capacity. This means even on steep or fast bike-specific trails, we need to be careful that there's no pedestrians, we need to ride slowly and in full control of the bike so that we don't hurt ourselves or others. Again, I want to mention the 5-person limit for groups right now. This seems to be a guideline, as I've heard about several municipalities ticketing groups of 2 or 3 people, and then we just heard about Doug Ford, the Premier, having 6 people over at his house. Under normal circumstances, I would say never ride alone if you're riding hard. Right now, however, I would recommend riding alone whenever possible, just making sure that you have a cell phone or some way to contact help if the worst happens. This is obviously for social distancing, and I feel it's justifiable right now because it's not the time to be riding aggressively anyways. Something else to keep in mind that relates to social distancing is which trails you choose to use. If you follow news networks like CTV or Global, you'll see that all the authorities are still concerned about community transmission and people spreading the disease from one area to another that's previously been unaffected. I don't know this for sure, but I feel like allowing people into the parks doesn't do a ton for the economy, so it's mostly just to help people stay sane. If you want to help the economy, you can support a local business, but if you're going out to a conservation area to enjoy the trails, you're doing it for yourself. To that end, please be considerate and only use the closest trail network to where you live, and only use that one network. Try not to spread it around. I hear a lot of people asking right now if Kelso Conservation Area is open for cycling, but what I tell everybody is we have the Cullum Trail and the Riverwood Conservation Area right next to Cycle Path. That trail network is pretty limited, but if it's your local trail network, it's the one you should be using right now. The last thing I want to talk about here is safety regarding the bike itself. I'm talking about repairs and maintenance. Now, normally most people could just pull their old bike out of their storage unit or their shed, pump up the tires, and then take it to the bike shop to get anything else solved that pops up. Bike shops are considered essential right now because of transportation repair, but bike shops are not as accessible as they used to be. For example, Cycle Path is open for business, but on very reduced hours and with a heavy emphasis on repairs instead of sales. Everything's being done curbside when possible, and due to the store's design, the number of customers has to be extremely limited inside the store if they have to come in at all. This means it can take a long time to purchase parts or tools or accessories or even new bikes, and the wait time for repairs is very long. If possible, it's even more important than normal right now to support your local bike shop because they're a local business and it's going to do good things for the economy. Cycle Path is located right next to City Centre in Mississauga on Burnhamthorpe, but there's tons of other shops in the city because it's so spread out, and all those other shops can do the exact same job Cycle Path can help you out in the same ways. There's Pedal Links in the north end of the city, there is the Trek store down on Dundas, there's Bike Zone further east on Dundas, there's Gears in Port Credit, and there's mobile services like Mateo's. I'll put links for all of them if I can find them in the bottom there, but no matter where you live, there will be services like this that should be able to help you out. Just remember to have patience with all the social distancing measures and show the staff some love. For any cyclist who's wanted to work on their own bike, now's the perfect time to get started. I've posted videos about bike fitting basics and how to assemble a home toolkit, and I'll post links for those down below, and I'll try and keep posting how-to videos, but there's already tons of resources for home mechanics online. Channels like GMBN or GCN and Park Tools are great resources. Working on your bike can be a little daunting at first, and some of the more advanced repairs do require specialty tools, but the vast majority of stuff is things you can do with basic tools like metric Allen keys or a metric wrench set. Just do as much research as you can and take your time when you're doing the repair. You'll get through it all perfect. Now, I know this video was long and kind of dry, so I want to thank you if you got this far. Cycling is undergoing a huge resurgence in popularity right now, and that's a good thing. More people riding means cleaner air, less traffic, and fewer people in enclosed spaces with others. Things will get back to normal eventually, but normal is probably going to have a different definition for quite a few years. Whatever happens, more waves of the virus, economic crashes, whatever it is, cyclists can come together and get the most out of the future as a community. Stay safe, treat everyone with respect, enjoy the outdoors, and keep your distance. I'm going for a bike ride.